The irrigation gate divided the field without appearing to. From a distance, it looked like a minor structure, two concrete walls narrowing a shallow channel, a metal frame set low to regulate flow. Water passed through it slowly, spreading into furrows beyond, feeding soil that depended on timing more than volume. Today, the timing was wrong. The crane approached from the flooded side. It walked with long, deliberate steps, legs lifting cleanly from the water and placing down again without splash. Its body stayed upright, wings folded tight, neck slightly curved forward. The bird was calm but attentive. The water around the gate moved differently. Upstream, it flowed steadily, shallow but continuous. Downstream, the surface looked similar, but between them, at the gate itself, the water hesitated, not stopped, paused. The pause was subtle. A thin band of water just before the gate slowed more than expected, thickening slightly as if pressure built without release. Small ripples formed and collapsed in place. Floating debris gathered, then drifted sideways instead of passing through. The crane noticed. It stopped a few steps short of the gate and watched. The bird's head tilted, one eye aligning with the surface. It was not reading depth, it was reading behavior. Gates were familiar. They often created changes, drops, accelerations, noise. This one did not. The water neither rushed nor fell. It simply delayed. The crane stepped closer. Its foot entered the water near the pause zone. Resistance increased immediately. The water pushed back against the leg more than the depth suggested. Silt stirred, but did not clear quickly. The surface above the foot smoothed instead of breaking. The crane withdrew the leg and waited. Something beneath the surface was misaligned. The gate's metal frame was partially lowered. Not enough to block flow, but enough to alter it. The opening beneath was narrower than usual. Water passed through, but not evenly. Pressure built upstream, while downstream levels had not yet adjusted. The result was a false stillness. The crane advanced another step. This time, it placed its foot directly at the edge of the pause. The water there behaved inconsistently, firm for a moment, then yielding. The ground beneath was soft, silt suspended without settling. The crane froze. Stillness here mattered. The wrong step could sink deeper than expected, disrupting balance and forcing a wing adjustment. That would draw attention. The crane waited. Wind moved across the field, bending crops in shallow arcs. The sound of water was minimal. No rush, no spill. Just a low, almost absent movement. The pause persisted. The crane lifted its head slightly and looked beyond the gate. Downstream water lay calm and shallow, spreading cleanly into irrigation lines. The crossing should have been easy, but the gate was not behaving as expected. The crane shifted sideways, testing a different angle. Its foot touched water again. This time, resistance came late, after the foot had already sunk slightly. The delay was wrong. The crane adjusted instantly, shifting weight back. The water had paused in the wrong place. Not at the gate opening, but before it. Pressure had backed up without spilling. The surface offered no clear signal of where support ended and flow resumed. The crane remained at the threshold. It did not retreat. It did not cross. It stood with one foot on firm ground and one hovering above uncertain water, measuring the mismatch between appearance and response. The gate was doing its job, but the water had not caught up yet. Until levels equalized, the pause would remain unstable, neither firm enough to step on nor fluid enough to move through cleanly. The crane waited, knowing that this was not a permanent barrier, but a temporary misalignment between structure and flow. And as it stood beside the irrigation gate, motionless against a landscape shaped by timing rather than force, the crane understood that crossing would not depend on strength or speed, but on recognizing when water stopped behaving like water and began behaving like something unfinished. The crane did not move forward. It held position at the edge of the channel, weight balanced evenly, body upright, but ready. The gate remained unchanged, but the water did not. The pause grew thicker. Upstream, the surface began to rise almost imperceptibly. Not enough to be seen at once, but enough to be felt. The water pressed more firmly against the crane's legs when it tested the edge again, as if weight had increased without depth. Fine silt continued to suspend. Instead of settling back to the bottom, it lingered in the water column, blurring the line between surface and ground. The crane watched this carefully. Suspended silt meant unstable footing. The crane lowered its foot again. This time it held it there longer, letting the water respond fully before committing weight. The resistance increased slowly, then softened unexpectedly. The delay was wrong again. The crane withdrew. Its foot left behind a brief depression that did not close immediately. Water did not rush in to fill it. Instead, the surface smoothed over, hiding the change beneath. The pause was masking movement. The gate frame above remained still. Metal bars held their position, catching bits of debris. Leaves and stems pressed against the opening, then slid aside without passing through. Flow continued, but unevenly. Downstream, the water level dropped slightly as irrigation lines drew more than the gate was releasing. This difference pulled subtly on the paused section, stretching it thin. The crane noticed the shift. The pause was no longer centered at the gate. It was drifting upstream, lengthening the unstable zone. The crane stepped sideways again. It tested a spot closer to the concrete wall. Here, the water behaved differently. Resistance arrived earlier, more predictably. The ground beneath felt firmer, compressed by the wall's presence. The crane placed its foot down fully. The ground held. The crane paused, assessing. One leg now rested in the water, the other on firmer ground. The bird remained stable, but only because it had chosen a narrow line of support. The pause continued to change. Small ripples travelled across it without direction, reflecting interference between incoming flow and restricted release. The surface neither advanced nor retreated. It thickened instead, like a held breath. The crane considered crossing now, but the crossing would require stepping through the thickest part of the pause, the place where pressure and softness overlapped most unpredictably. The crane waited. Time mattered here. If upstream pressure increased enough, the pause would collapse into movement. Water would resume flowing properly, either spilling forward or settling back. Either outcome would clarify footing, but until then, the pause would remain deceptive. The crane stood without moving, conserving energy. Its posture did not change. Wings remained folded. Only the head moved occasionally, tracking surface changes. A faint sound reached the bird, water beginning to slip beneath the gate more evenly. Not enough to alter the surface yet, but enough to suggest adjustment. The paws trembled, just slightly. The crane lifted its foot from the firmer edge and returned it to dry ground. The bird reset its stance, ready to move in either direction. The water had not corrected itself yet, but it was close. And as the crane remained beside the irrigation gate, watching the pause thicken and drift instead of resolving, it became clear that this crossing would hinge on timing alone, on choosing the moment when water stopped pretending to be still and resumed behaving like a continuous body again. The pause did not resolve, it shifted. The crane noticed it first, not by sight, but by pressure. Water against the legs no longer felt evenly held. One moment it resisted, the next it loosened, as if the weight behind it were redistributing rather than increasing or releasing. The surface line crept, not forward toward the gate, and not back toward the crane, but sideways, curling slightly along the concrete wall, thickening in one corner while thinning in another. The pause was no longer centered, it was sliding. The crane adjusted its stance. It spread its feet a little wider, lowering its center of gravity. This posture reduced the risk of sudden imbalance if the ground gave way unevenly. The bird remained upright, but readiness replaced stillness. The water changed texture. Small tight ripples appeared and vanished without traveling anywhere. The surface looked tense, stretched thin between opposing demands, upstream pressure and downstream draw. The crane lifted one foot again. This time, it placed it deliberately into the area that had just begun to thin. The resistance arrived earlier than before. The foot stopped sinking almost immediately. The ground beneath felt firmer, compressed by shifting pressure. The crane held. For the first time since arriving, the water gave a clear response. Not safe yet, but readable. The Paws was breaking its own shape. The crane tested weight. It leaned slightly forward, transferring a fraction of its mass onto the submerged foot. The water displaced cleanly. The silt settled instead of lifting. The surface accepted the change. The crane froze again. The Paws continued to migrate, now pulling back toward the gate opening. The thickest part narrowed, concentrating closer to the metal frame. A faint trickle sounded. Not a rush, just the sound of water finally committing to movement beneath the gate. The delay between pressure and release shortened. The crane acted. It stepped forward into the thinning zone, placing its foot carefully, then shifting weight smoothly without hesitation. The water responded by flowing, not resisting. The ground held long enough. The crane took another step. This one crossed the line where the Paws had been strongest. The water there had softened, but no longer deceived. It moved aside instead of pushing back. The crane was halfway across. The gate frame loomed just ahead, concrete walls close on either side. The water beneath now flowed unevenly but continuously, carrying silt away instead of suspending it. The crane did not stop. It maintained a steady pace, not rushing, but not pausing either. Stopping here would invite the Paws to reform behind the legs. The bird passed beneath the metal frame. Downstream, the water behaved normally again, shallow, clear, spreading cleanly into channels that led across the field. The crane stepped out of the channel and onto firmer ground. It paused there and turned slightly, looking back. Upstream, the Paws was gone. Water flowed smoothly now, the surface line flattened, debris moving through the gate without gathering. The misalignment had corrected itself. The crane remained still for several seconds, confirming stability. The crossing was complete. Not because the gate had changed, but because the water had finally aligned with it. The crane moved on across the field, legs clean, posture relaxed again. Behind it, the irrigation gate continued regulating flow as designed. But the bird carried with it the precise knowledge that barriers were not always solid or obvious, and that sometimes the most dangerous moment was not when water rushed, but when it hesitated in the wrong place, long enough to invite a step before it was ready to support one. The crane did not hurry once it reached the far side. It stood on firm ground beyond the irrigation channel, legs straight, body upright, allowing the last tension to leave its posture. The water behind it continued to move now, shallow and even, spreading into furrows that carried it away without resistance. The Paws was gone. Where water had thickened and hesitated before, it now passed cleanly through the gate. The surface no longer smoothed over disturbance. Ripples travelled outward and disappeared as expected. Silt settled quickly, revealing the channel bottom again. The crane watched briefly. This was not curiosity, it was confirmation. The crossing had not changed the system. It had only coincided with the moment when pressure and release finally matched. The crane's movement had been timed to that alignment, not responsible for it. The bird shook one leg once, a small motion to shed remaining droplets, then placed it down again. Balance felt normal now. The ground responded predictably. The field ahead opened wide. Crops stood in orderly rows, leaves lifting slightly in the breeze. The crane resumed walking, steps long and unhurried, moving away from the gate and toward open feeding ground. Behind it, the irrigation structure continued its work. Metal held. Concrete-shaped flow. Water followed the path laid out for it, no longer pausing where it should not. Nothing about the gate suggested difficulty or danger, but the crane carried the memory precisely, not as fear, but as calibration. It had learned that water could pause without stopping, that resistance could arrive late, and that surfaces could mislead by smoothing over instability. These lessons would apply elsewhere, at other channels, other crossings, other moments when systems lagged behind themselves. The crane did not look back again. It moved into the field, posture relaxed, wings still folded, head forward. The crossing had cost time, but not energy. Waiting had been correct. The irrigation gate remained behind, ordinary and quiet. And as water continued to flow where it had once hesitated, the landscape returned to its routine, leaving only the crane with the understanding that in managed environments, danger often appeared not as force, but as delay, and that survival depended on recognizing when a pause was not rest, but misalignment waiting to resolve.